One of the things I wanted to start out with here is see if this rings a bell with anybody. Have you ever experienced a scenario like this? A plant manager knows that there's a leadership skills problem. They ask their HR person to find a leadership training provider. Several trainers submit bids and they select the one with the glossiest brochure and the lowest cost. About a dozen supervisors and junior managers attend the training. 2 of them say that it was really good and they're appreciative. About 4 of them grumble and say it was a waste of time. And the rest feel like it's good information, but they're skeptical that they're going to be able to apply what they learned. The trainer gets paid, everybody goes back to work, nothing changes. And so the lesson there is that if you're going to do training or some sort of a change initiative, it's only worth doing if you can get good results from that investment.
Have this common goal, and this is the way that I wrote it. This is one of those things that's subjective, right? So again, not me being right, but me just learning and listening and then processing. I think that we could all get behind that. We are in the business of providing sustainable, repeatable, successful outcomes in the presence of uncertainty. Okay, so that the bottom note is really interesting, and that uncertainty is the X factor that makes it difficult. I think that sustainable, repeatable, successful outcomes, I think who doesn't want that? You know, I want that in everything in my life, you know, but it's that presence of uncertainty that causes fits. Yeah.
Okay. So when we talk about the pitfalls of an RCA system, and this is going to play into my view of reliability and the role into HPI, is that most RCA systems fail because they lack analytical breadth and depth. They're not doing the how, can, and the why. They think that failure is linear. They think that there's one root cause. So because of that, that's why those types of things under the commodity acronym of RCA fail.
Jim Reason came up with this in 1995, which I'm a big fan of Jim Reason's, but I have to tell you, even Jim says, look, don't take the Swiss cheese model too seriously. It's just a metaphor. I would say to you, if the world is filled with holes in Swiss cheese, what's the solution? And the only answer is, well, you fill the holes in the cheese. And I would say, yeah, but what if you can't see all the holes in the cheese? But by the way, you're going to run out of money and resources before you plug all the holes in the cheese.
While well-intentioned, we would argue that the lack of consistent definitions and standards, as well as the absence of guidance for how to systematically implement, monitor, measure, or improve an organization's just culture and high reliability efforts has actually led to more confusion than it has clarity.
I think how many events have actually changed the world? And it's actually not as many as you think. And my definition of what changed the world is something that actually changed our behavior. So, you know, there's the things with technology, you know, the printing press, the telegraph, the telephone, personal computers, cell phones, now unfortunately morphing into mobile devices. You know, God, I'm old enough to remember when I went out of the house without a phone, and that was such a great feeling. Now, if you walk out of the phone, everyone starts shivering like something bad's going to happen.
So to change those, what we're going to do is create this learning cycle process, this operational organizational improvement process, where we act positively and we increase trust. So increasing trust and the ability to increase that trust, I think, is probably your first basic question, and how to make a shift towards success. And then understanding the blue line, the master of the people who do the work. Because there's a lot of process improvements you don't understand, and there's a lot of opportunity for events that we yet don't understand. Right?
Provided an opportunity to give the workforce things to understand and why they should do it. Because really, if still today, if they use the right tool the right way, they get an error rate reduction by a factor of 10. But we also need to teach managers why it's important for them. And this includes performance modes, traps, triggers, tools. All of those things still exist. We just have to have a way to talk about it differently.
So can we change the system? When I talk about the system, I want to refer to that more, have you thinking about that as the culture. And when I think about culture, I think that culture is simply what most people do most of the time. And what people do are behaviors. So to get the right behaviors, we have to define and enable the right behaviors. And so then leaders have to guide the right behaviors to get the right habits. And then when most people have the right habits, you get the right culture.
Field theory then says that you are in a homeostasis always in your system, and that it's there for a reason, and it's not a bad thing, except it is going to include what you don't want. So let's say, for instance, there's mistrust in your organization, and that gets in the way of communication. Then there's homeostasis that's holding in place mistrust.
What I see with the current state of event learning is that it tries its best to infer that it's not people. Think of this. When in truth, people are at the root of everything that goes right and everything that goes wrong.
Concluded, what's the first rule of Fight Club? Don't talk about Fight Club. So I came to the conclusion that the first rule of systems thinking is don't talk about systems thinking. Because I'm trying to convince you that you should learn something that you don't know about at the moment, and I'm discounting you and putting you off. And so why should I do that?
So we'll go on to another person here. I thought you said somebody else is chiming in last time. So I'd like somebody to talk about, well, what is Kurt actually trying to do and what happened? Do you suppose any employee will ever make a suggestion ever again? And what do you think? And remember, Kurt was the worker of the day on day one, by the by. And do you predict success?
So motivation to do better. You've all probably experienced it. You know, you've seen ideas or decisions driven mainly by influential group members. I've seen problems that get solved and then solved again and again because they really were not adequately solved.
Number one, what was missing is factors external to the focal organization, such as, you know, the industry and market that they're in, the legal system they're under, the regulatory requirements, the relationships with, you know, a web of contractors and suppliers, the focus of the responses of our, you know, our survey respondents was very much on an organization.
Voluntary incident reporting systems, they believe, identify only 5% of adverse events. They believe AI, experts believe, has the potential to reduce medical errors by 30 to 40%, treatment expenses by as much as 50. That's a huge number. We talked about the $1 trillion, cutting $1 trillion in half. So that's immense if that could be done.
And we call this sort of the 4 Ps of safety. If you know anything about marketing, they call it price, promotion, place, and something else. We sort of co-opted that phrase here, that metaphor with the 4 Ps. So we want to look at people, places, processes, and then add predictive analytics. So really there's not one, product, price, place, promotion. That's it. Thanks, Jessica. So we can actually, there's not one particular use case of collecting this data. It can actually be pointed in different directions.